My name is Dr. Alina Mercer. I'm 33 years old. 5 years ago, my older sister told my parents that I had quit medical school. She lied. That one lie erased me from my own family. My parents stopped answering my calls. They blocked my number. They didn't show up when I matched for residency. They weren't there when I walked across the stage to receive my white coat as an attending physician. They weren't at my wedding. For 5 years, I existed without a family. Then, last month, my sister was rushed into the emergency department, severe internal bleeding, unconscious, critical. The trauma team called for the chief of surgery when the double doors burst open and my mother saw the name stitched in navy thread across the white coat walking toward the gurney. She grabbed my father's arm so tightly he winced. Before I continue, take a moment to like and subscribe if stories about truth and second chances matter to you. And tell me where you're watching from and the local time there. I always wonder how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back. Autumn 2019. A kitchen table in Cedar Grove, Ohio. The last evening my father ever looked at me with something that resembled pride. There were 2 daughters in the Mercer household, but only one of us ever truly counted. My sister, Vanessa, is 3 years older than me. She was magnetic from the start. School plays, debate team, student leadership. The kind of person who could charm a room of strangers before dessert was served. Adults adored her. Teachers praised her. My parents built their world around her. Shined up. My father, Richard Mercer, supervised operations at a packaging plant. My mother, Helen, worked part-time as a payroll clerk. They valued respectability, presentation, compliance. Vanessa embodied all 3. I was a quiet one. The one reading anatomy flashcards during Thanksgiving. The one who listened more than she spoke. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't troubled. I was simply overlooked. There's a difference between being ignored and never being seen at all. Here's what that looked like. 8th grade. I qualified for the State Science Expo, the only student from my school to make it that year. That same weekend, Vanessa had a regional theater performance. Guess which event my parents attended? When I returned home with a silver medal, my father glanced at it and said, "Good job, Lena." He never asked what my research was about. He never asked how long I'd worked on it. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself achievement was enough. So I buried myself in textbooks, advanced placement classes, volunteer shifts at local clinics. I decided if I couldn't be the daughter they celebrated, I would become the daughter they couldn't dismiss. And for one brief, fragile moment I was. The day my acceptance letter arrived from Westbridge University School of Medicine, over 2,000 miles from home, something shifted. I remember the envelope trembling in my hands. Vanessa was visiting that weekend. She was 20 for then, working in corporate communications at a firm downtown. Stable job, decent salary, predictable path. Predictable was her comfort zone. Dad opened the letter at the kitchen counter. He read it once. Then again. "Westbridge," he said slowly. "That's competitive." Then he looked at me, truly looked at me and said, "Maybe you'll surprise us after all." It wasn't warmth, but it was acknowledgement. And to me, it felt like oxygen. That night, my mother called relatives. She called neighbors. She even called her old bridge partner. Alina got into medical school, she kept saying, as if testing how it sounded aloud. There was pride in her voice. Real pride for me. Across the dinner table, Vanessa smiled, but it was a precise smile. Measured. Her lips curved. Her eyes did not. I see it clearly now. At the time, I thought she was just tired from the drive. After that, she started calling more often. "How's orientation? Who are you living with? Are your professors intimidating?" She asked about my schedule, my lab assignments, my rotations. She seemed interested, supportive, even. I didn't realize she was collecting details. The lie came 2 years later. Second year of med school. The workload was brutal, but I was thriving. I had just completed a competitive research placement. My evaluations were strong. That winter, I got a short, cold email from my father. "We're disappointed in you. Call your mother." No context. No explanation. I called immediately. My mother answered on the second ring. "How could you drop out and not tell us yourself?" she demanded. I thought she had the wrong daughter. "I didn't drop out," I said. "What are you talking about?" Silence. Then, Vanessa said you were overwhelmed, that you left the program weeks ago. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me, I explained. I sent transcripts. I forwarded confirmation emails. I even asked my academic advisor to call them. They didn't believe me. She wouldn't lie about something like that, my father said. Not she wouldn't. She wouldn't about that job within days. My tuition support was withdrawn. My emergency credit card was canceled. Calls went unanswered. Messages were returned with one sentence. We need space. Space turned into silence. Silence stretched into years. I took on additional loans. I worked overnight shifts tutoring pre-med students. I slept for hours a night. I graduated near the top of my class. No one from my family attended. When I matched into a surgical residency program, I emailed them the news. No reply. When I got married 3 years later to a fellow physician who had watched me rebuild myself from the ground up, I mailed invitations anyway. They didn't come. 5 years passed. Then last month, during a late shift, trauma paging alerted overhead. Female, early 30s. Severe abdominal hemorrhage. Vehicle collision. I was now chief of trauma. Surgery. I scrubbed in without looking at the name. The gurney rolled through the doors, and there she was. Vanessa. Pale, blood-soaked, unconscious. Behind her stood my parents, older, smaller somehow. My mother saw my name badge first. Then my face. Her expression cracked. Open. Shock. Confusion. Something like shame. I didn't pause. I didn't hesitate. I operated for 4 hours. When it was over, Vanessa was stabilized, critical, but alive. I removed my gloves and stepped into the waiting area. My father stood up slowly. For the first time in 5 years, we were in the same room. You're the chief? He asked. Yes, I said calmly. I never left. The silence between us felt heavier than any accusation. My mother began to cry. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The truth does not shout. It endures. Vanessa survived. Recovery will take time. As for my family, we are speaking again, carefully. Cautiously. Truth has a way of resurfacing, even after years buried under pride and favoritism. I lost 5 years, but I didn't lose myself. And in the end, that mattered more. She remembered every single name I mentioned, every professor, every classmate, every attending physician who intimidated me during rounds. I thought my sister was finally seeing me. I thought maybe medical school had unlocked something between us. Respect, closeness, whatever it is that ordinary sisters seem to share without effort. I didn't realize I was handing her ammunition, every detail, every insecurity, every private fear, and I offered it all with a grateful smile. 3rd year of medical school. That's when everything split open. My roommate, my closest friend, was a woman named Emily Carter. Emily grew up in foster care. No permanent home. No family safety net. She built herself from scratch. She was the reason I survived 1st year. There was a week during anatomy finals when I called home, exhausted and barely holding it together. My mother cut me off mid-sentence. Not now, Alina. Vanessa had a terrible day at work. I hung up and sat on our kitchen floor. Emily slid down the cabinet next to me and said, "There, Loss. Now get up. We have cadavers to memorize." She always chose action over self-pity. In August of my 3rd year, Emily was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, advanced, unforgiving. She had no family to step in, just me. The next morning, I went straight to the dean's office. I explained everything, her condition, the lack of support, the reality that someone needed to advocate for her. The school approved a formal leave of absence. 1 semester, caregiver designation, paperwork signed, spot secured, return date set for January. Everything official, everything documented. I moved into the spare bedroom of her apartment. I drove her to chemotherapy. I slept in plastic waiting room chairs. I learned the rhythm of oncology wards at 3 a.m., when pain peaks and hope feels thin. I held her hand when nausea racked her body so violently she could barely breathe. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I called Vanessa. Maybe I wanted comfort. Maybe I still believed she was becoming the sister she pretended to be. I told her about Emily, about the diagnosis, about the leave of absence, about my plan to return in the spring. Her voice was warm, smooth. "Oh my God, Lena, That's heartbreaking. You do whatever you need to do. I won't tell Mom and Dad. They'll just panic. 3 days later, she called them. I don't know exactly what she said that night. I wouldn't understand the full architecture of her lie until 5 years later, when it collapsed under fluorescent hospital lights, but the consequences were immediate. The call came at 11:02 p.m. I was sitting beside Emily's hospital bed. She'd reacted badly to chemo, and they admitted her overnight for monitoring. My phone lit up. Dad. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Your sister told us everything, he said. His voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. The dropping out. The boyfriend. The lies. My stomach dropped. I didn't drop out, I said carefully. I took a leave. It's approved. I can send you the… Vanessa showed us the messages. He cut in. She showed us proof. What proof? My hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. I'm in a hospital right now. I'm taking care of my friend. A pause. She said you'd say that. He replied. She said you'd have a story prepared. Then my mother's voice entered the call, trembling. How long were you planning to keep this from us, Alina? Mom, please, call the dean. I'll give you the number. It's not secret. It's a leave of absence. I have paperwork enough. My father snapped. Do not call this house again until you're ready to tell the truth. You've humiliated this family. The line disconnected. I stood there staring at the screen. Call duration, for minutes and 12 seconds, for minutes. That's how long it took for my parents to choose her version of me over the real one. I slid down the wall and sat on the hospital floor. Inside the room, Emily's pump began to beep. 20 minutes later, a text from Vanessa. I'm sorry, Lena. I couldn't keep covering for you. They deserve to know. There was no apology in it, just precision. She hadn't acted out of concern. She'd executed something. And she signed it with a broken heart emoji. I was over 2,000 miles from home. I had $46 in my bank account, and I had just been disowned. I need you to understand something. I tried. From that hospital hallway, with no money and a dying friend 20 feet away, I tried. Over the next 5 days, I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 went to voicemail. By the 4th, my father's number was blocked. 2 days later, my mother blocked me too. I sent 2 emails, one short, one long. The long one included the official leave paperwork as a PDF attachment. I listed the dean's direct line. I included the name of Emily's oncologist. I offered hospital contact information. I gave them every verifiable fact a reasonable person would ask for. There was no reply. I wrote a handwritten letter for pages. I mailed it priority from Oregon. 5 days later, it came back unopened. Double quotes returned to sender stamped across the envelope in red ink. That was the moment it stopped being a misunderstanding and became a decision. Returned to sender, unopened. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, tight, deliberate, unmistakable. That hurt more than if she had written something cruel. It meant she had held the envelope in her hands and chosen not to read it. I called my Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, the only person in my family who had ever treated me as something other than Vanessa's quieter shadow. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Let me talk to your dad." She called him that same evening. I know because she called me back 40 minutes later. Her voice sounded older. "He told me to stay out of it, sweetheart," she said softly. "He said you've made your bed." She tried to explain about the official leave of absence. He hung up on her. 5 days, 14 phone calls, 2 emails, 1 handwritten letter, 1 relative acting as a bridge, every single attempt rejected, blocked, or returned. And here's what finally settled into my bones. This wasn't sudden. This was history repeating itself, just louder. Every science fair they skipped, every achievement that received a distracted nod. Every time Vanessa's version of events was accepted instantly while mine required proof. This wasn't new behavior. This was a pattern of my entire life, compressed into its most ruthless form. On the 6th day, I stopped calling. Not because I gave up, because I understood. They hadn't chosen her that week. They'd chosen her years ago. She simply gave them permission to stop pretending otherwise. Emily died on a Sunday morning in December. Quietly. Just the long, steady tone of the monitor flattening out and pale winter light filtering through the hospice blinds. I was the only one in the room. No one from my family knew. The only person I had told, Vanessa, was busy maintaining the story she'd constructed. The reason for my leave of absence had just stopped breathing, and she didn't even ask. One organized a small service. 6 people attended. Emily's former foster sister drove in from 2 hours away. A couple of classmates came. One oncology nurse who had grown attached to her broad white lilies. The chapel seated 60. I stood at the front and read a eulogy to rows of empty pews. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't shattered, because I had been crying for 3 months straight, and there was nothing left inside me to release that night. I sat alone in her apartment, our apartment. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. Her coat still hung by the door. I opened my laptop and stared at the re-enrollment form for the spring semester. I almost closed it. Then I found something, tucked inside her worn copy of Grey's Anatomy. Our running joke. She had bookmarked the chapter on the pancreas with a yellow sticky note. Her handwriting was shaky, but steady enough to be deliberate. Finish what you started, Lena. Become the doctor I know you are. And don't you dare let anyone, especially your own blood, decide who you get to be. She'd written it weeks earlier. She knew she wouldn't be around to say it out loud. I closed the laptop, opened it again. There are always 2 options when everything collapses. Break or build. I chose to build. Not for my parents. Not for revenge. For Emily. And for the version of myself she believed in. I returned in January. No family support. No safety net. I took out additional loans. Picked up a part-time research assistant position. Survived on hospital cafeteria leftovers more often than I'd ever admit publicly. Medical school doesn't pause for grief. Exams don't reschedule because your parents erased you. Clinical rotations don't shorten because you cried in a supply closet at 2 a.m. So I stopped crying. And I worked like my life depended on it. Because in some ways, it did. I graduated on time. No one from Cedar Grove attended. I matched into a surgical residency at Northbridge Medical Center, one of the busiest level 1 trauma centers in the state. That's where I met Dr. Eleanor Whitaker, 60 years old, precise, unyielding, brilliant. She carried herself like tempered steel wrapped in a white coat. She became the mentor I needed. The steady presence I'd lost. In my 3rd year of residency, I met Daniel Hayes. He was a civil rights attorney volunteering at a legal aid clinic partnered with the hospital. Quiet confidence, observant eyes, a sense of humor so dry it took a second to catch. He was the first person I told the entire story to. He didn't interrupt, didn't pity me, didn't offer solutions. He just listened. When I finished, he said 4 words. You deserve better. That was it. That was enough. We married on a warm Saturday afternoon in Dr. Whitaker's backyard. 30 guests. Simple. Intentional. Daniel's father walked me down the aisle. I mailed an invitation to my parents. To the same house that had returned my letter unopened. And I waited. It came back the same way my letter had. Unopened. The envelope wasn't even creased. Aunt Carol came to the wedding, though. She cried enough for 2 missing parents after the ceremony. As the guests filtered toward the garden lights and music, Dr. Whitaker pulled me aside. She handed me a sealed envelope. A nomination, she said calmly. Don't open it yet. You're not ready? I didn't question her. I placed it in my desk drawer when we returned from our short honeymoon, and I left it there. 5 years passed. In that time, I became someone my parents wouldn't recognize. Let me pause for a moment. If you've ever tried to explain yourself to people who already decided who you are, if you've ever realized the truth didn't matter because someone else's version was louder, you understand this kind of silence. Now let's keep going, because what happened next? I didn't see it coming. January, present day. I'm 32 years old. Chief of trauma surgery at Northbridge Medical Center. I own a small house outside the city with a porch that catches the early morning sun. I have a husband who still makes me laugh when I least expect it. And we have a golden retriever named Hippocrates Hippo, who has never once judged me for eating cereal straight from the box at midnight. It's a good life. Not flashy, not performative. Built slowly, intentionally, brick by brick. But there's a specific kind of ache that doesn't fully disappear. It settles somewhere behind your ribs, in the space where a family is supposed to be. I don't wake up crying anymore. I don't check my phone hoping for an Ohio area code. But every Thanksgiving, when I set the table, There's a moment, just a flicker, where I count the plates and feel the absence like a phantom limb, and Carol still calls every Sunday. She's my thread back to that world. I never ask about my parents, but I listen when she volunteers information. They're healthy dots still in the same house. Vanessa divorced 2 years ago. She works in medical device sales now. The irony has never been subtle. Last week, and Carol called with something different in her tone. Cautious. Double quotes Heather. She said, "She's the only one who still uses my childhood nickname. There's something you need to know about Vanessa, something concerning." Before she could continue, my pager went off. Trauma activation, multi-vehicle collision. I told her I'd call back. I never did, because what she was trying to warn me about was already in motion, speeding down the interstate at nearly 60 miles an hour, moments away from running a red light within the hour. The person she meant would be on my operating table. Bleeding. Critical. My parents in the waiting room. My name on the surgical board. I just didn't know it yet. Let me rewind slightly, because what Vanessa did wasn't a single lie. It was a sustained campaign. Over the years, and Carol had reluctantly shared fragments, carefully, like she was dismantling something volatile piece by piece. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. For 5 years, Vanessa maintained the narrative. At every holiday gathering, she played the grieving older sister. "We don't talk about Alina," she would tell relatives softly. "It's too painful for Mom and Dad." She would shake her head, lower her voice, let silence fill in the blanks, but she didn't stop at implication. She added details. She told my grandmother I'd become unstable. She told an uncle that she'd heard I was struggling financially. She told my mother one Christmas Eve that she had tried repeatedly to reconcile, that I was the one refusing contact. She inverted the entire story. According to her, I had abandoned them. And Carol once told me about a Thanksgiving dinner where Vanessa sighed dramatically and said, "I begged her to come home. She won't answer my calls." I don't know what I did to make her hate us. Meanwhile, I was in an operating room trying to save a teenager who had been stabbed outside a convenience store. The brilliance of it, and I use that word with disgust, was this: Vanessa didn't need my parents to forget me. She needed them to believe I had rejected them. If they thought I had left, then their silence wasn't cruelty. It was self-protection. Their grief became validation. Their absence became justified, and she remained exactly what she had always been. The loyal daughter, the one who stayed. She wasn't protecting them. She was protecting her position. There was one more piece. Aunt Carol eventually revealed something darker, but I didn't learn that until much later. 6 months ago, Daniel and I were sitting in a quiet cafe on a rare morning off. He stirred his coffee and watched me carefully. "You know," he said, "there's something about your sister's story that doesn't add up." I looked up. He continued, "She didn't just isolate you. She built infrastructure around the lie. That takes planning." I exhaled slowly. "I know." He tapped his fingers against the mug. "People don't usually escalate like that unless they feel something slipping." And for the first time, I considered a possibility I hadn't allowed myself to examine. What if this was never about anger? What if it was about fear? Fear of being replaced, fear of losing the spotlight, fear that for once I might step fully into it. I didn't know then that within months, that spotlight would turn back toward our family in a way none of us could control. And when it did, it would expose everything. He had been holding it in for 2 years. "There's something I never told you," Daniel said quietly, setting his coffee mug down with deliberate care, the way he does when he's about to speak in his courtroom voice. 2 years ago, he explained, someone had contacted human resources at my hospital. They used a false name. They asked about my employment status, whether I had ever been disciplined, whether my credentials were legitimate. I stared at him. "Who?" "I had a colleague look into it," he said. "The inquiry was routed through an IP address registered in Cedar Grove." My chest went tight. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Hippo's tail brushing against the cabinet she was digging. I said slowly, "Yes." Daniel replied. She was looking for something, anything, she could use to validate the story she'd built. She didn't find anything. "No," he said evenly, "because there was nothing to find." I wrapped both hands around my mug. The ceramic burned against my palms, but I didn't pull away. She didn't just lie once, I whispered. She's been tracking me. Daniel reached across the table and covered my hands with his. That's not sibling rivalry, he said gently. That's something else. He was right. Vanessa hadn't told a lie and moved on. She had constructed something, a structure, load-bearing beams of misinformation, walls, reinforced with repetition, every holiday story, every whispered rumor. Every quiet inquiry into my career. Another brick. I could have acted then, filed a complaint, confronted my parents with evidence, forced the truth into daylight. But I didn't, because life was about to expose everything for me. In the most brutal and public way imaginable. And it started with a pager. Thursday night. January 3:07 m. The pager ripped me out of sleep. Daniel shifted beside me. Hippo lifted his head from the foot of the bed. The screen glowed in the dark. Level 1 trauma. Motor vehicle collision. Female, 35. Blunt abdominal trauma. Hemodynamically unstable. ETA, 8 minutes. I was dressed in for minutes. On the road in 6. The highways were empty, slick with a thin sheen of winter rain. That particular shade of darkness only January can produce. As I drove, I did what I always do. Mechanism of injury. Velocity. Probable organ damage. Unstable vitals plus blunt force trauma usually meant internal bleeding, likely splenic rupture, possibly liver laceration. I had performed this operation countless times. By the time I batched through the ambulance bay entrance, my mind was clinical, focused, detached. The trauma team was assembling. To residents, a seasoned trauma nurse, anesthesia on standby. I grabbed the intake tablet from the charge station and swiped to the incoming chart. Patient, Vanessa Mercer. Dob, March 14, 1990. Emergency contact, Richard Mercer. Father, I stopped walking. The hallway noise receded. The overhead pages. The squeak of shoes on linoleum. The distant beeping of monitors. For 2 seconds, maybe 3. I wasn't chief of trauma surgery. I was 26 years old again, sitting on a hospital floor in Oregon, listening to a dial tone after being told not to call home. Dr. Mercer? Linda, my charge nurse, stood beside me. You okay? I blinked. Set the tablet down. I'm fine, I said evenly. Prep Bay 2. Page Dr. Shaw for backup. I want him scrub ready. The ambulance siren grew louder. And behind that sound, I knew, before I saw them, that my parents were coming too. The ambulance doors burst open. The stretcher rolled fast. Vanessa lay strapped down, unconscious, oxygen mask clouding with shallow breaths. Blood soaked through her blouse at the abdomen. One arm dangled limp over the side rail. The paramedic spoke in clipped urgency. BP dropping, 80/40. Heart rate 140 and climbing. 2 large-bore IVs running. Possible internal hemorrhage. Behind them, breathless, frantic, came my parents. My mother looked smaller, thinner, her hair more gray than I remembered. She wore a bathrobe and mismatched slippers. My father had thrown on jeans and a flannel shirt. His face was ashen. That's my daughter, he shouted, trying to move past triage. Where are you taking her? I need the doctor in charge. Carla, a nurse I had worked alongside for 3 years, stepped firmly into his path. Sir, you need to stay back. I want to speak to whoever's leading this case. Carla didn't hesitate. She simply gestured toward me as I stepped forward and pulled my surgical cap into place. That would be her. My father followed her line of sight. And our eyes met. Recognition doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it's quiet, flicker. Then a fracture. His expression shifted in stages. Confusion. Disbelief. Understanding. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. I didn't look away. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke the way I do before every emergency. Surgery. Calm. Direct. I'm Dr. Alina Mercer. I'm chief of trauma surgery. Your daughter has severe internal bleeding. We're taking her to the OR now. My father's lips parted, but no sound came out. My mother whispered my name. Not doctor, not ma'am, my name. But there was no time for reconciliation. No time for explanations. Vanessa's blood pressure was still falling. I turned back to the team, move, and we ran toward the operating room. The doors swung shut behind us, leaving my past in the waiting room. Sir, family must wait in the surgical waiting area. The trauma team is already here. The chief is handling this personally. The chief? My father snapped, grabbing Carla's arm. Then get me the chief. Now. Carla instinctively glanced through the glass toward the trauma bay. She saw me. GOWNED, gloved, my name stitched clearly across my chest, for a fraction of a second. Her eyes widened as she read it. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not now. She straightened immediately. Sir, the chief is preparing for surgery. You'll receive an update as soon as possible. Please. This way. My parents were guided down the hallway. My mother whispered prayers under her breath, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. My father kept turning back, peering through every strip of glass as if he could will himself through it. She's all we have, he said hoarsely. Please. She's all we have. I heard every word through the petition. She's all we have. As if I had never existed. I stepped into the scrub room alone. 30 seconds. That's all I allowed myself. I turned the faucet and let hot water rush over my hands. Stainless steel reflected a warped version of my face back at me. Distorted, stretched, appropriate. Grub cap secured. Mask tied. Badge visible. A woman surgically removed from her own family tree. Now being asked to surgically save the one who cut her off for a brief, dangerous second. I considered walking out. Calling Dr. Shah to take over, letting my parents owe their daughter's life to a stranger instead of me. It would be simpler. Cleaner. But there was a patient on that table with a ruptured spleen and what looked like a severe liver laceration. She was bleeding out. She would be dead within the hour if the most experienced trauma surgeon in the building didn't operate. And that surgeon was me. I paged Dr. Shah directly. I have a conflict of interest, I said calmly. The patient is a family member. I'm disclosing now and documenting it. If my judgment is compromised at any point, you take lead. No hesitation. Understood? He replied without pause. I instructed Linda to record the disclosure in the chart. Everything documented. Everything transparent. By the book. Then I pulled on fresh gloves and pushed through the operating room. Doors. Vanessa lay under bright surgical lights, bruised, pale, oxygen mask fogging and clearing with shallow breaths. We don't talk about Alina, she would tell relatives softly. It's too painful for Mom and Dad. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't existed 5 years ago. For 3 seconds, I allowed myself to see her as she was, not the architect of my exile, not the voice behind the lie. Just a human body on my table, and that was exactly how I needed her. Let's begin, I said. Scalpel, 3 hours and 40 minutes. That's what it took to undo what speed and steel had done. The spleen was shattered beyond repair. We removed it. The liver laceration was deep but salvageable, meticulous suturing, layer by layer, controlling each bleed before moving to the next. Two separate mesenteric vessels were actively hemorrhaging. We clamped, cauterized, stabilized. I spoke only when necessary. Suction, clamp, lap pad, retract. My hands moved with the precision of repetition. Fast when urgency demanded it. Slow when accuracy mattered more than speed. The residents watched closely. They always do during complex repairs. I could feel their focus sharpen when the liver repair became delicate. I did not falter. I couldn't. At 6:48 a.m., I tied the final stitch. Vitals stabilized. Blood pressure normalized. Output steady. She was alive. Dr. Shah, who had stood quietly at the periphery the entire time, lowered his mask. That was exceptional, he said softly. Do you want me to speak to the family? I removed my gloves, dropped them into the bin, and washed my hands. Automatic. Practice steady. 10,000 times before. No, I said. This one is mine. I caught my reflection again in the scrub room mirror. Same face. Same name stitched over my heart, but something had shifted. For 5 years, I had been the daughter who vanished. Now I was a surgeon who brought her sister back from the edge of death. And for the first time in a long time, I was about to walk into a room where the truth could no longer be ignored. Those two realities were about to collide in a waiting room 40 feet away. I adjusted my scrub top, checked my badge, took one steady breath. Then I walked out the hallway. Felt longer than it ever had. Hospitals at 7 a.m. have a particular stillness, fluorescent lights humming softly, televisions murmuring weather forecasts to empty chairs, exhaustion hanging in the air like fog. To other families sat scattered along the edges of the room, and in the center row, rigid, sleepless, terrified, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, mask lowered around my neck, scrub cap removed, hair pulled back tightly. My badge rested against my chest in clean block lettering, visible from several feet away. Dr. Alina Mercer, MD, FACS Chief of Trauma Surgery. My father stood immediately. He always stood first. Control was instinct. Doctor, he began urgently. How is she? Is Vanessa? He stopped. His eyes dropped to my badge, then rose to my face, then dropped again. Recognition doesn't always explode. Sometimes it fractures. I watched it move through him, a tremor starting in his hands, climbing into his jaw. My mother looked up half a second later. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Her hand clamped around my father's forearm so tightly that later he would have bruises shaped like fingertips. 5 seconds of silence. 5 years suspended inside it. I spoke first, calm, measured. The same voice I use with every family in crisis. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. I'm Dr. Mercer, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter sustained a ruptured spleen and a significant liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She is stable and currently in the ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Not Mom. Not Dad. I watched the distinction land behind me. Through the glass partition, I could see Linda and two nurses standing still. They understood. They had already pieced it together. My mother moved first. She stepped toward me, arms lifting instinctively as a sob broke free. Alina? Oh my God. Alina? I stepped back. Just half a step. Polite. Unmistakable. She froze. Her hands hovered between us before falling slowly to her sides. My father's voice came out rough. You're a doctor? Yes. You're the chief? Yes. But Vanessa said. He stopped. What exactly? I asked evenly. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I could almost see his mind attempting to reassemble 5 years of certainty that was disintegrating. In real time. My mother was crying openly now. We thought you left school. She told us you dropped out. She said you were struggling. She told you I quit. I said that I was involved with someone unstable, that I cut you off, that I refused contact. I kept my tone even. No tremor. No raised volume. I took a formal leave of absence to care for a dying friend. It was approved, documented. I sent you the paperwork. Behind me, Carla pressed her hand to her mouth. One of the residents looked down at the floor, jaw tight. None of it was true, I continued. Not one word. My father defaulted to habit. This isn't the time, Alina. Your sister was in intensive care. I know, I replied calmly. I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes ensuring she would make it there. The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. I am fully aware of where she is, for the first time in my life. My father had no directive. No correction. No authority to assert. Silence did what arguments never could. 5 years of blocked calls, returned letters ignored, emails, none of it broke through. But standing here, alive, accomplished, undeniable, that truth carried weight no envelope ever could. My mother reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. The letters, she whispered. You said you sent letters. 2 emails, I said. 1 short, 1 detailed. My leave documentation attached. The dean's contact information included. I mailed a handwritten letter priority. I held her gaze. You returned it unopened. I recognized your handwriting on the envelope. Her knees buckled slightly against the chair. I didn't, she began, shaking her head. I never saw. My father turned toward her slowly. You handled the mail, he said, his voice thin. Her eyes widened. I thought. She looked between us helplessly. Vanessa said it was. More excuses. She said reading it would only make things worse. There it was. Not anger. Not even cruelty. Just surrender. They hadn't verified. They hadn't questioned. They had trusted the loudest voice in the room. And now that voice was unconscious 3 floors above us. My father looked back at me. You saved her, he said, quietly. Yes, after what we. Yes. Because that was the simplest truth in the room. I didn't save her for them. I saved her because that is who I am. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, monitors beeped faintly down the corridor. And for the first time in 5 years, my parents were looking at me without distraction, not past me. Not through me. At me. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was reckoning. I didn't lie, she whispered. Not exactly. She was different back then, distant. She talked about taking a break from school. She mentioned a guy who wasn't good for her. I thought she was spiraling. I thought if I told you everything, you'd panic. Mom's voice came out thin. So you told us she dropped out of medical school. I thought she was going to. Monica shot back quickly. She was overwhelmed. She said she might take leave. I assumed you assumed. Dad repeated. The word landed heavy. Monica's eyes filled again. But this time the tears felt less convincing. I was trying to protect this family. Irene always made everything so dramatic. I didn't think she cut us off completely. I thought she'd come home eventually. She tried. Mom said. 3 simple words. Not shouted. Not sobbed. Just placed in the air between them. She called. Mom continued, staring at the blanket instead of her daughter. 14 times. Monica's jaw tightened. Maybe she wanted attention. That was the moment. Linda told me later that something changed in my father's posture. For 5 years, he had stood like a wall. In that room. He sat down. Slowly. Double quotes. He saved your life, he said. Monica blinked. What, your sister? He clarified, each word deliberate. She just spent nearly 4 hours in surgery keeping you alive. Monica looked toward the door as if she expected me to be standing there. I wasn't. She didn't have to, Dad continued. There were other surgeons. Mom finally looked up. But she did. The heart monitor steadied. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Dad asked the question he should have asked 5 years ago. Why didn't you tell us the truth? Monica's mouth opened. Closed. Opened. Again. I didn't think you'd choose me if you knew, she said finally, and there it was. Not strategy. Not manipulation. Not even pride. Fear. She was always the impressive one. Monica went on, voice smaller now. Top of her class, awards. Professors loved her. When she got into surgical residency, you wouldn't stop talking about it. I was just average. Mom's face crumpled. You were never average. But I felt invisible, Monica snapped, and immediately winced from the pain in her abdomen. When she said she was overwhelmed and thinking about leave, I saw an opening. Just once, I wanted to be the stable one, the responsible one. So I told you she'd quit. I thought it would fade. I thought she'd come back and correct it. But when she didn't, Dad said quietly, you doubled down. Monica didn't deny it. Silence again, not explosive, not theatrical. Just heavy with understanding. Mom stood and walked to the window, shoulders shaking. We didn't verify anything. Not one call to the school. Not one visit. We just believed what was easier. Dad looked at the fur line running into Monica's arm. She saved you, he repeated, after this time, as if reminding himself. After everything, Monica's eyes filled again, but the calculation was gone. What remained looked raw. She hates me, she whispered. Dad shook his head once. No, if she hated you, you wouldn't be alive. I didn't hear. I was in my office, reviewing charts, signing discharge orders, functioning the way I always functioned. Compartmentalized. Precise. Linda knocked once before entering. You should know, she said gently. They're not fighting anymore. I looked up. They're talking, she added. Really talking. I nodded once. Professional mask still in place. Good? She hesitated. Your dad asked if there's a time he could speak with you. Off hospital grounds. On your terms. That almost broke me. Almost. I'll think about it. I said. And I meant it. Because forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a surgery of its own. Layer by layer. Careful not to reopen what barely healed. Outside my window, morning had fully arrived. 5 years ago. I walked away from my family believing I'd lost everything. Today, I stood in the same building where I built my career from nothing, and for the first time the truth wasn't chasing me anymore. It was standing in the open. And this time, no one could pretend not to see it. I understand, he said. Not defensive, not angry, just broken, I understand. The ICU room held that sentence like it was fragile glass. Mom lifted her head slowly. Wedding, she whispered. Ruth nodded once. 3 years ago. Small ceremony. Courthouse first, then a reception at a garden venue outside Columbus. She sent you an invitation. Certified mail. Dad turned then. Certified. Ruth didn't soften it. You signed for it. The memory landed visibly. His hand went to his forehead as if he could press it back into place. I thought it was more paperwork, he muttered. More drama. It was ivory cardstock, Ruth replied. Embossed. Silence again. Monica finally moved, shifting against the pillows. She got married without you because she wanted to punish you. No, Ruth said calmly. She got married without them because she stopped expecting them to show up. That one went through the room clean. Mom was still holding the phone. She scrolled again, rereading the graduation email. Her thumb hovered over my name at the top of the screen like it might burn her. I missed her residency, she whispered. Yes, Ruth said. I missed her white coat ceremony. Yes. I missed her wedding. Yes. Each answer landed like a tolling bell. Monica swallowed. You're acting like I forced you. You're adults. You chose what to believe. Dad looked at her then. Really looked at her? We trusted you, he said. And you didn't verify, Ruth added gently, because it was easier to accept a story where Irene failed than one where you failed her. No one disputed it. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Monica's composure cracked at the edges. I didn't think it would last this long, she said, softer now. I thought she'd come back. I thought she'd fight harder. Ruth's voice sharpened. She did fight. You just never let her into the ring. Mom stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the floor. She walked to the sink in the ICU room and gripped it with both hands. Staring at herself in the small mirror above it, she saved you, she said, almost to her reflection. After all of this, Monica didn't respond. Dad finally stepped away from the window. His face looked older than it had that morning, not physically, but structurally, as if something foundational had shifted. We're going to fix this, he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't commanding. It was a man who had just realized authority doesn't undo absence. Monica let out a hollow laugh. You think she wants to fix this? I don't know what she wants, Dad replied. But I know what we owe. Another silence, not heavy this time. Final. I found out the rest that evening. Ruth came to my office after visiting hours. She didn't sit at first, just leaned against the door frame the way she used to when I was studying for boards. And she'd bring me takeout. They know, she said. I nodded. I figured. They saw everything. I figured that. Tucci stepped inside fully then. Your father asked for your wedding photos. That caught me off guard. He did. Yes, he said he wants to see the moment he missed. I looked down at the file on my desk but didn't read it. And Mom, I asked. Ruth exhaled slowly. She keeps saying she never stopped being our daughter over and over, like she's trying to memorize it. I swallowed. That's good, I said. But my voice wasn't as steady as I intended. Ruth studied me carefully. What do you want, Irene? It was the first time all day someone had asked that. Not what was fair. Not what was deserved. Not what would look noble. What I wanted. I don't want an apology in a hospital hallway. I said finally. I don't want tears because the evidence is overwhelming. I want them to understand what they did when there wasn't proof in front of them. Ruth nodded. That may take time. I know. And Monica, she asked gently. I thought about the operating room, about my hands inside her abdomen, about choosing precision over resentment. She's alive, I said. That's enough for now. Ruth smiled faintly. You're better than this family deserves. No, I replied quietly. I'm exactly what this family raised. That was a complicated part. The discipline, the work ethic, the drive to excel. It came from them. So did the silence. Ruth squeezed my shoulder once before leaving. Later that night, long after rounds were done and the ICU lights dimmed, I stood alone at the window outside Monica's room. Through the glass, I could see Mom asleep in the chair, her head tilted awkwardly to one side. Dad sat upright, watching the monitor like it was something sacred. Monica was awake, staring at the ceiling. No performance left. No script. Just consequences. For 5 years, the story of our family had been built on a lie. Today it collapsed, not in shouting, Not in spectacle. But in documentation, in timestamps, in signatures, in truth. And the thing about truth is once it's charted, it becomes part of the permanent record. And I continued, you won't frame it as a misunderstanding. You won't soften it. You won't say we both made mistakes. You will say you lied. Repeatedly, intentionally. Monica swallowed. Okay. You will also tell them about the calls to my medical school. Her head snapped up. Do I have to? Yes. A long pause, okay? I studied her face carefully. No performance, no pivot, just consequence settling in. And this, I added, quieter now, is not about humiliation. It's about restoration. You don't get to rebuild your image by keeping me fractured. She nodded again, slower this time. What happens after I send it? She asked. That depends on you, I said. Trust isn't rebuilt with a single email. It's rebuilt with consistency, over time. And you don't get access to my life just because you told the truth once. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Do Mom and Dad know about the calls to your dean? No, I said. They don't. Will you tell them? If you don't, another silence. Not hostile. Measure. Finally, she whispered, I don't want to be this person anymore. I believe she meant it, but intention and identity are different surgeries. One is a decision, the other is a reconstruction. Then start acting like someone else. I said. Nathan glanced over briefly from his table by the window, not intruding, just steady. I drew strength from that, from the life I had built without chaos at its center. I'm not asking you to earn my forgiveness, I said. I'm asking you to earn proximity. Those are different things. Monica blinked. What's the difference? Forgiveness is internal. I can choose that for my own peace whenever I'm ready. Proximity is external, access. Holidays, phone calls, future children knowing their aunt. That's earned. Her voice cracked slightly. Will you ever trust me again? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I know I won't lie to myself about it to make you comfortable. She nodded. We sat there for a moment, the hum of espresso machines filling the space between us. Then I stood. One more thing. She looked up. You don't get to compete with me anymore. Not in career, not in attention, not in narrative. I'm not your rival. I'm your sister. If you can't separate those, we don't have a relationship. Tears slid down her face. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet acknowledgement. I understand. I studied her for another second. For the first time in decades, she wasn't performing strength. She was experiencing exposure. I'll expect the email within 72 hours. I said. She nodded again. You'll have it. I picked up my coat. Take care of your incision, I added automatically. No lifting over 10 pounds. Walk daily. Call if you spike a fever. A faint, almost broken smile crossed her face. Yes, doctor. I held her gaze for a beat. Then, softer. Yes, Irene. That mattered. I walked toward the door. Nathan stood as I approached, falling into step beside me without asking questions. Outside, the air was cold, clean. He waited until we reached the car before speaking. How do you feel? I considered it, like I just closed a chapter, I said. Not the book. He nodded. That night, 9:17 p.m. My phone buzzed. Subject line, to the family, a correctional 47 recipients included. I sat at the kitchen table while Nathan washed dishes behind me. Hippo rested his chin on my foot. I opened it. It was long, uncomfortable, unambiguous. She admitted to lying, to intercepting calls, to manipulating conversations, to contacting my medical school, to telling relatives I was unstable, unreachable, irresponsible. She did not excuse it. She did not dilute it. At the end, she wrote, Irene never stopped being part of this family. I made sure you believed otherwise. That is my fault, not hers. If you want someone to direct your anger toward, direct it at me. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Ruth with one word. Received. My phone began lighting up almost immediately. Cousins and uncle. 2 aunts. Shock. Apologies. Invitations to talk. I silenced it. Not tonight. Reconstruction takes pacing. I didn't hear. Across town, in a house that had held 5 years of distortion, my parents were reading the same email. The truth now existed in writing. Permanent. Documented. Irreversible. In for the first time since I was 26 years All the story being told about me matched the life I actually lived. That's not revenge, that's alignment. And alignment, I've learned, is where healing actually begins. I answered. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't fear, it was raw relief. Irene, she whispered, I never realized. I didn't know what had happened. I thought. She paused, swallowed. I thought you just disappeared? No, Nana, I said, carefully, slowly. I was always here, just not where they told you to look. Her hand shook as she held the phone. I should have known better. Oh, my child, I should have known better. You didn't, I said. But now you do. And that's enough to start. The call lasted 30 minutes. She wanted to know everything, every email, every letter, every attempt I'd made to reach out. I told her, in order, calmly, the way I tell residents about trauma cases. Facts first, context second. By the time we hung up, she was crying again, softly, quietly this time. But it was the kind of crying that opens the door to repair. Over the next few days, messages, emails, and calls rolled in. Apologies that were long overdue. Questions about my life, my work, my husband. And yes, Hippo, my family, the extended one, started threading themselves back into my story, slowly, cautiously, aware that they had a long history of misjudgment to atone for. And I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, laptop open, and let it happen. I didn't rush. I didn't demand. I just responded, shared small pieces, and held my boundaries firmly. Every response was a test of whether they could approach me with honesty, or whether old habits would take over. Some days it felt like wading through molasses. Some days it felt miraculous. But always, it was mine to control. For the first time in years, I felt the rhythm of my life match the truth of my life. The hardest part, though, wasn't the messages or the apologies. It was knowing that 5 years of absence could never fully be recovered. There would always be a hollow, a space where trust had been violated, where milestones had been missed. But I didn't need that space to be filled completely. I just needed it acknowledged. I needed it respected. And slowly, piece by piece, it was by the next family gathering. My parents were attending, but differently. Not as rulers of a narrative they thought they controlled, but as participants learning to listen. Nana John held my hand tight, just for